Gentlemen, I want you to sit tight for a moment, because what I'm about to share with you is going to challenge some of the things you think you know about women. We're going to talk about 7 psychological facts about women's bodies that most men have no clue about. And let me tell you right now, once you hear them, you'll start to see women in a completely different light. The first fact is about body language. You see, when a woman crosses her legs, plays with her hair, or even adjusts her posture, men often think these gestures are random. But they aren't. Psychologists have shown that these little movements are deeply tied to attraction and communication. A woman's body often says what her words never will. Sometimes she doesn't even realize she's doing it. For example, leaning slightly forward in a conversation or mirroring, a man's movements are subtle signs of interest. Men who pick up on these cues often feel like they have some secret insight. But really, they're just paying attention to something women's bodies already reveal. It's not magic, it's psychology in motion. The second fact has to do with smell. Now, most men underestimate just how powerful a woman's sense of smell is, especially during different phases of her cycle. Women's bodies are literally wired to detect certain pheromones, and studies show that a woman can be more drawn to the natural scent of a man she finds genetically compatible. Think about that for a second. Before you even open your mouth, before you crack that joke or flex that muscle, her body may have already made a decision about whether you feel right to her. And no cologne in the world can fake that natural connection. The third fact is about memory and detail. Men often wonder why a woman remembers small things, like what shirt you wore on the third date, or exactly what you said in passing weeks ago. It's not about being obsessive. It's actually how the female brain is tuned. Women's bodies are built with stronger connections between the parts of the brain that handle memory and emotion. So, when something matters to her, her entire body locks it in. That's why she'll recall the way you smelled the first time you hugged her, or the exact tone of your voice when you said something kind. It's not just nostalgia, it's biology reinforcing emotion. Now, let's talk about fact number 4, which is about pain tolerance. A lot of men assume women are fragile, but in reality, women's bodies are designed to endure extreme levels of discomfort. Think about childbirth alone, but here's the kicker. Psychologically, women often perceive and express pain differently than men. They may verbalize it more, which makes men think they're weaker, but in many situations, they're actually handling far more than they let on. In fact, some research suggests women's bodies have unique ways of coping with long-term or chronic pain. That means a woman who seems like she's powering through a tough day is probably showing more strength than most men can imagine. The fifth fact has to do with attraction and confidence. Men often believe it's all about looks, but psychology tells us that women's bodies respond strongly to confidence and status cues. This doesn't mean money or muscles. It means the way you carry yourself, how secure you are in your own skin. A man who stands tall, speaks clearly, and acts with self-assurance actually triggers physiological responses in many women. Their bodies pick up on confidence as a signal of safety and stability, and that reaction is often stronger than any physical appearance. The sixth fact is something many men miss entirely. Women's bodies are directly influenced by stress and emotions in ways men don't usually notice. For example, a woman's cycle can shift if she's under high levels of stress. Her appetite, sleep, and even energy levels can fluctuate dramatically depending on her emotional state. This isn't moodiness like some men like to joke, it's biology. Women's hormones are deeply tied to their mental and emotional experiences, and their bodies react accordingly. Understanding this fact can completely change how men view women's behavior. because what might seem like inconsistency is often her body responding to very real changes in her environment. Finally, the seventh fact is about aging. Men and women age differently, and women's bodies often undergo shifts that men underestimate. For instance, while men may lose muscle mass faster, women often maintain flexibility and resilience longer. Psychologically, many women also experience what researchers call a second wave of confidence as they age, when their bodies and minds sink in new and powerful ways. While society constantly pressures women to look young, their bodies are often becoming stronger mentally and emotionally with time. A woman at 40 or 50 may actually be more confident, secure, and attuned to her body than she was at 20, and her psychology reflects that growth. Now, I know some of you are thinking, all right, these are interesting, but are they really shocking? Let me remind you of something. Men and women live together, work together, love each other, raise families together, and yet most men still have no real idea what's happening beneath the surface of a woman's body. They see the outside but miss the signals, the chemistry, the resilience, the complexity. And that's the real shock. It's not that these facts exist. It's that so many men go through life never learning them. So what do we do with this knowledge? The answer is simple. Start paying attention. Women's bodies aren't puzzles to be solved, but they are constantly communicating. The more men understand, the more respect they'll have, and respect is what changes everything. When you realize her movements aren't random, when you respect the strength she carries, when you grasp how deeply her body is connected to her emotions and her choices, you stop underestimating her. You stop thinking you've got it all figured out, and you start to see her for what she really is, a human being whose body and mind are far more powerful than you ever realized. And that's the truth that shocks men the most. Not just the facts, but the realization that they've been walking blind to them for so long. Here's something else that men rarely think about. A woman's body has an extraordinary ability to read micro-expressions, those tiny flashes of emotion on a person's face that appear for just a fraction of a second. While both men and women are capable of spotting them, research shows that women are generally better at picking up on them without even realizing it. That means her body is already gathering emotional data before you've said a single word. You may think you've masked your irritation, your doubt, or your excitement, but her body has likely clocked it and filed it away. It's why men sometimes feel like women can read minds. It's not magic. It's perception heightened by biology and psychology working hand in hand. Another striking fact is the way women's bodies respond to touch. Gentle, non-sexual touches, like a brush of the arm or a reassuring hand on the back, trigger different reactions than they might in men. Touch activates the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone, at a higher level in women. This means that even small gestures of affection can create lasting impressions, strengthening trust and connection. Men often underestimate the power of this. They focus on grand gestures, but sometimes it's the lightest touch that speaks loudest to a woman's body and mind. We also need to talk about intuition. Men roll their eyes when women say they just know something, but there's a psychological basis for it. Women's brains have more cross-hemisphere connections, which means information travels differently. Their bodies process emotional and logical data simultaneously, which can create a sense of instinct that feels almost supernatural. When she tells you she has a bad feeling about something, it's not always guesswork. Her body may have picked up subtle cues, tone of voice, posture, environmental details that never made it into her conscious mind, but still shaped her response. Men often laugh this off, but in truth, it's one of the most fascinating ways a woman's body communicates. Now, let's go deeper into attraction. Men assume it's all visual. See a pretty face, feel attraction. Simple, but for women, attraction is a full body process. Her body is scanning for signals of safety, compatibility, energy, and confidence. Even the way a man interacts with others, how he treats a waiter, how he greets a stranger feeds into her body's decision making. And here's the kicker. She doesn't always know it's happening. Psychologists call it unconscious attraction. Her body might lean in without her realizing. Her pupils might dilate when she hears your voice. These are physical reactions rooted in psychology. Men often misinterpret this as playing hard to get, but in reality, it's her body processing information far beneath the surface. Here's another truth that will surprise you. Women's bodies are more reactive to sound than men's. A woman's hearing is often sharper at higher frequencies, and her body is more attuned to tone and inflection. This is why the way you say something matters as much as the words themselves. Sarcasm, warmth, aggression, all of these live in tone, and her body is wired to notice. Men sometimes wonder why a woman seems to react strongly to something they thought was harmless, but often it's not the statement, it's the delivery. Her psychology picks up on every subtle shift in sound, and her body reacts to it instantly. Then there's the relationship between women's bodies and competition. This one often shocks men the most. Women may not always show it openly, but their bodies respond strongly to social comparison. For example, being in the presence of another attractive or confident woman can influence how a woman feels about herself in that moment. It can even shift how she perceives her partner. This doesn't mean women are shallow or jealous. It's deeper than that. Their psychology is deeply tied to social dynamics, and their bodies react to the environment around them, often in ways that men never notice. We also can't ignore the power of hormones on mood and behavior. Men like to make jokes about it, but the truth is far more complex. Hormonal shifts affect energy, focus, sleep, and even how women experience the world around them. A man might think she's being inconsistent, but often her body is navigating biological rhythms he can't see. What's remarkable is the level of resilience women show in managing this constant ebb and flow, while still handling work, relationships, family, and everything else life throws at them. When men understand this, they begin to realize just how much unseen strength is being carried in a woman's body every single day. Another fascinating fact is that women's bodies are better at multitasking, not just because of practice, but because of how their brains are structured. Multiple areas of the brain activate during problem solving, especially when it involves both logic and emotion. Men often joke that women can juggle 100 things at once, but there's real science behind it. Her body is designed to process multiple streams of information, which is why she can be answering an email, remembering your mother's birthday, and calming a child all at the same time. For men, it can look overwhelming, but for women, it's often second nature. Let's pause and think about something most men never even consider: the way women carry stress. Men tend to externalize stress, sometimes through anger or physical activity. Women's bodies, however, often internalize it. Stress can show up in their skin, in their digestion, in their energy levels. It can cause tension, headaches, stomach issues, or sudden exhaustion. To an outside observer, it might seem like she's fine, but her body is working overtime to process stress. That means a smile on her face doesn't always tell the full story. This is why emotional support and patience matter more than men realize. Her body is carrying weight you can't see. Here's something that still amazes researchers today. Women's bodies are more responsive to social bonding. Friendships, emotional conversations, and community connections don't just feel good. They physically sustain women's health. Talking through feelings, spending time with trusted people, sharing experiences, all of these reduce stress hormones and boost immunity. Men sometimes dismiss this as gossip or over-socializing, but in reality, women's bodies thrive on emotional connection. It's not trivial, it's survival, written into their biology. Another fact that men overlook is how women perceive time. Studies suggest that women often experience a stronger awareness of time passing, tied to biological and psychological rhythms. This can shape how they make decisions about relationships, careers, and family. Men might think she's rushing or overthinking, but her body is giving her signals about timing that he doesn't feel in the same way. This difference in perception often explains conflicts in pacing, when to commit, when to take risks, when to settle down. We can't forget about resilience. Over and over, research shows that women's bodies handle long-term stress and recovery differently than men's. Whether it's illness, emotional trauma, or physical challenges, women often show remarkable psychological resilience. Their bodies and minds adapt, sometimes more quickly than men's, to difficult circumstances. This isn't to say women don't struggle, they do. But beneath the surface, their biology often equips them to endure, to rebuild, to keep moving forward when many others might collapse. And here's one final detail to sit with. Women's bodies are constantly adapting in ways men will never fully understand. From cycles to hormones, from intuition to resilience, they are in motion, adjusting, recalibrating. Men look at women and think they're unpredictable, but the truth is, they're not unpredictable at all. They're responding intelligently, biologically, psychologically, to everything around them. Every gesture, every sigh, every laugh is part of a larger story written into the body. The tragedy is that most men never learn how to read it. There's another layer to this conversation that men rarely stop to consider, and that is how women's bodies are wired to respond to changes in environment faster than men's. For example, temperature shifts, lighting, background noise. All of these can impact how a woman feels and reacts. This is not about sensitivity in the sense of being weaker. It's actually about adaptability. Women's bodies evolved to be finely tuned to their surroundings, a survival mechanism that allowed them to protect children and themselves in uncertain conditions. That hyper-awareness still exists today. When she says a room feels uncomfortable, or when she notices something in the environment that you didn't even register, it's not fussiness. It's her body sending signals that you don't get as quickly. Men often miss this, but once you start noticing, you realize women are like natural sensors, picking up on subtle changes long before others do. Another point that often surprises men is the role of posture in women's psychology. Posture is not just physical. It affects mood, confidence, and even decision-making. When a woman stands tall, shoulders back, head high, her body actually sends signals to the brain that boost self-esteem and assertiveness. The fascinating part is that the reverse is true as well. If she's hunched or closed off, her body communicates vulnerability to her mind, which can influence how she feels in that moment. Men tend to view posture as something you adjust for appearance, but for women, it can have profound psychological effects. This is why encouraging her to own her space and stand confidently isn't just about how she looks. It's about how she feels inside. Let's move into another area that men often overlook: sleep. Women's bodies process sleep differently than men's, and their cycles of rest are more easily disrupted by stress, noise, or hormones. This means that while a man might sleep through anything, a woman may wake multiple times or find herself restless. Psychology plays into this because lack of sleep directly affects mood, focus, and decision-making. When men dismiss a woman as cranky, After a rough night, they don't realize her body is navigating an entirely different relationship with rest. And despite this, many women push through their days with determination, juggling responsibilities even when their bodies haven't given them the recovery they truly need. Speaking of recovery, let's talk about exercise. Men often assume women approach fitness the same way they do, but women's bodies respond differently to physical activity. For example, high-intensity workouts may affect women's hormones in ways that influence mood and energy far more strongly than men experience. On the other hand, steady and mindful movement, yoga, walking, dance, can have profound psychological benefits, balancing stress hormones and boosting mental clarity. What's striking is how much of women's relationship with exercise is tied not to appearance, but to regulation of mood and energy. A woman might choose a workout not because she's chasing a physique, but because her body craves balance. That connection between physical movement and mental well-being is one of the most powerful yet underestimated facts about women's bodies. Now let's consider appetite and food. Women's bodies respond to flavors and textures in more complex ways than men's, often because of hormonal influences. Cravings, for instance, are not random. They can be tied to biological needs, mood regulation, or even memory triggers. A certain food may comfort her not just because of taste, but because of the psychological associations it carries. A meal her grandmother cooked, a treat tied to childhood, a smell that reminds her of safety. Men sometimes laugh at cravings or view them as indulgent, but women's bodies are actually communicating needs, both biological and emotional. Food is not just fuel. It's a language their bodies use to express what's missing or what's needed in that moment. Another reality is how women's bodies hold trauma. Men often compartmentalize, storing painful experiences in the mind. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to experience trauma as a full body memory. This is why certain sounds, smells, or touches can trigger reactions years later, even if the conscious mind has tried to move on. The psychology of trauma is deeply tied to the body, and women's physiology makes them more prone to carrying that weight physically, through tension in muscles, changes in posture, or sudden waves of emotion. When men misunderstand this, they may think she's overreacting or being dramatic, but the truth is, her body is reliving an experience in ways she can't fully control. Recognizing this reality requires empathy and patience, something many men never realize until they've seen it firsthand. We also need to talk about women and creativity. Studies suggest that hormonal shifts throughout the month can influence creativity and problem-solving in fascinating ways. There are times when a woman's body is more primed for detail-oriented tasks, and other times when it's tuned for big picture thinking and innovative ideas. This rhythm often goes unnoticed, but if you pay attention, you can see how her energy and imagination ebb and flow with her biology. Men tend to think of creativity as a steady skill. You either have it or you don't. But women's bodies actually influence when and how creativity shows up. This means a woman might produce her most original work not by forcing it, but by listening to her body's signals. Another fact worth mentioning is women's ability to read social cues in groups. When you put several people together, women's bodies are often quicker to pick up on subtle dynamics: who's uncomfortable, who's dominant, who's being left out. This is partly psychological, but also biological. Evolution favored women who could sense group dynamics because social harmony was tied to survival. Even today, this ability gives women an edge in negotiation, teamwork, and leadership, because their bodies are reading the room in ways men often overlook. Men sometimes dismiss this as overthinking, but in truth, it's an advanced form of perception that has been hardwired over centuries. We should also consider laughter. Men often think women laugh because they find something funny. That's true, but there's more to it. Women's bodies use laughter as a social and psychological tool. It signals comfort, attraction, even trust. Sometimes she laughs not because the joke was amazing, but because her body is saying, "I feel safe with you." Men often misinterpret this, assuming their humor is irresistible, when in reality, her laughter may be less about the punchline and more about the bond her body feels in that moment. Now, let's talk about risk-taking. Men and women approach risk differently, and women's bodies often process danger with more caution. This doesn't mean women are less brave. It means their psychology is tied to long-term thinking and survival strategies. A man might rush into a decision for thrill or gain, while a woman's body triggers responses that weigh safety, consequences, and community impact. That instinctive caution is often what keeps families and societies balanced. Men may call it hesitation, but it's really a form of wisdom written into her biology. Lastly, think about the way women's bodies express joy. It can be through laughter, movement, music, dance, even stillness. But what's powerful is how deeply joy registers in their physiology. A moment of genuine happiness floods the body with endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin chemicals that don't just elevate mood but strengthen immune function and reduce pain. Men sometimes dismiss joy as fleeting, but for women, these moments of happiness are survival tools. Their bodies thrive on joy in ways that go beyond the surface, reinforcing resilience, healing, and connection. There's a dimension of women's bodies that men rarely talk about, and that's the connection between movement and mood. When a woman walks into a room, her body language is often the first thing people notice. But what most men don't realize is that her stride, her pace, even the rhythm of her steps can reflect her psychological state. If she's walking quickly and with purpose, her body is signaling focus and determination. If she's moving slowly or hesitantly, it might be her mind processing something heavier. What makes this fascinating is that she might not even be aware of it herself. Her body tells her story before her mouth ever does. Men often say women are hard to read, but if you look closely at the way she moves, you'll find she's communicating volumes without uttering a word. Another aspect that catches men off guard is the relationship women's bodies have with music. Music doesn't just entertain, it changes physiology. Women's heart rates and breathing patterns often synchronize with rhythm more quickly than men's, and songs tied to memory can trigger intense emotional responses almost instantly. A single melody can pull her back to a childhood moment or a first love. And because women's bodies are more closely tied to memory and emotion, the experience of music can feel almost physical, as though the sound is moving through her. Men may enjoy music too, but for many women, it's not just background noise. It's a deep embodied experience that lingers. Let's also talk about intuition in relationships. A man might think he's hiding doubt, boredom, or distraction well, but a woman's body often picks up on it through micro changes in voice, eye contact, and touch. That's why she'll ask questions like, "What's wrong?" Before you've said a word. Her body has already registered that something feels off, and her psychology reacts before she can explain why. Men sometimes feel exposed in these moments, like she can see right through them, and in a way, she can. It's not supernatural. It's her body's heightened ability to interpret the signals he didn't realize he was sending. Consider, too, the way women's bodies handle change. Life throws transitions at everyone, moving cities, starting a new job, losing loved ones. But research shows that women's physiology is often more flexible in adapting to new circumstances. Their hormones, while sometimes seen as a disadvantage, actually help them recalibrate faster in the long run. They might feel turbulence at first, but their bodies often restabilize with resilience. This flexibility can explain why women frequently become the anchors of families and communities during periods of upheaval. They absorb, adjust, and keep moving forward, while others are still struggling to find footing. And then there's the way women's bodies respond to storytelling. When they hear a narrative that resonates emotionally, their brains release oxytocin more readily, creating a stronger sense of empathy and connection. That's why a good book, film, or even a personal story can feel so immersive to her. It's not just entertainment, it's a biological reaction. Men may be entertained by stories, but women often embody them, living through the emotions of the characters as though they were their own. This ability to connect deeply through narrative is one reason women are often more attuned to empathy and understanding in real life. Here's another overlooked truth. Women's bodies are built with stronger immune responses in many ways, yet that strength comes with complexity. Hormonal shifts can cause the immune system to fluctuate, making them more vulnerable at certain times and more resilient at others. This dance between strength and sensitivity shapes how women experience illness, healing, and recovery. For men, getting sick is often a straightforward battle. For women, it's a layered process where biology and psychology interact constantly. And through it all, many women still power through their responsibilities without ever letting on how much their bodies are balancing beneath the surface. Let's shift to vision. Women often see color differently than men. Their eyes and brains are wired to detect subtle variations in shades that men might not distinguish at all. This heightened color perception is not just about fashion or aesthetics. It influences how they interpret environments, art, and even emotional cues in facial expressions. When a woman says two colors aren't the same, and a man insists they are, chances are her body is right. That ability to see more nuance isn't just physical. It ties into the psychology of attention to detail. It means her world is painted with subtleties men often miss. Then there's the way women's bodies respond to anticipation. Looking forward to an event, a trip, or even a small moment of joy can trigger positive psychological and physical changes long before the experience happens. Their bodies release feel good chemicals in advance, essentially allowing them to savor something before it arrives. Men may brush this off as daydreaming, but for women, anticipation is part of the experience itself. It creates motivation, lifts mood, and sustains energy. That's why a simple plan, like a weekend outing or a holiday celebration, can carry so much weight. Her body is already living in that joy, even before it unfolds. Let's not forget the power of memory tied to scent. While both men and women associate smells with memories, women's bodies are often more sensitive in this area. A whiff of perfume, fresh laundry, or a certain flower can transport her instantly to another time. Because her sense of smell is tied closely to the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, these associations can be vivid and long-lasting. Men might dismiss the importance of scent, but for women, it's a pathway to memory, intimacy, and comfort. This is why a favorite fragrance or the smell of home carries such deep significance. There's also something remarkable about how women's bodies process touch in group dynamics. For example, a hug between friends can release as much oxytocin as intimacy with a partner. This means physical closeness is not just about romance, it's about bonding and emotional support. Men may sometimes underestimate the importance of platonic touch in women's lives, but it's a crucial part of their psychological health. Holding hands, linking arms, leaning on a friend's shoulder. These gestures create real biological shifts that sustain well-being. Another layer men often miss is how women's bodies respond to silence. In a world full of noise, stillness can be deeply restorative. For women, moments of quiet can reduce stress hormones and create clarity of thought in ways that feel almost healing. Men may see silence as empty, but women's bodies often use it as a tool to reset. Sitting in calm, even for a few minutes, can have profound effects on her mood and perspective. It's not just relaxation, it's recovery woven into biology. And finally, think about the way women's bodies handle growth across time. Every decade brings changes physical, emotional, psychological, and yet what's striking is how adaptable they are. A woman at 20, at 30, at 50 is not the same, but her body is constantly rewriting her story. With each stage, new strengths emerge, new resilience appears. Men often fear aging, but many women embrace it because their bodies teach them to see growth not as decline, but as transformation. They carry their history not as a burden, but as proof of survival. And every scar, every change, every shift is part of that living testimony. Another truth that most men overlook is how women's bodies react to uncertainty. While men may lean on action or distraction when faced with the unknown, women often experience uncertainty physically. Their hearts race, their stomachs tighten, their sleep becomes lighter. But instead of ignoring those signals, many women use them as a compass. Their bodies don't just warn them of discomfort, they help them slow down, analyze, and make careful choices. What looks like hesitation is often her biology protecting her, urging her to consider not just herself, but everyone who may be affected by the outcome. Men often misread this as indecision, but in reality, it is a survival strategy embedded in her body's design. There's also the fascinating way women's bodies use eye contact. For men, eye contact is often about dominance or confidence, but for women, it's layered with subtlety. A woman's pupils may dilate when she feels safe or interested. Her gaze may soften when she feels empathy, or she may break eye contact as a way of managing intensity. What men miss is that these shifts are rarely conscious choices. Her psychology and physiology are working together, responding to the person in front of her without her needing to think about it. That's why eye contact with a woman can feel so powerful. It's not just looking, it's a full body exchange of emotion and attention. We should also consider how women's bodies respond to gratitude. When they feel appreciated, their stress levels drop, their mood lifts, and their energy often increases. Small gestures of acknowledgement can ripple through their entire being, affecting how they feel for hours or even days. Men sometimes underestimate the impact of simple words like thank you, but for women, those moments of recognition are deeply restorative. It's not about validation in a shallow sense. It's about biology responding to acknowledgement, telling the body it is safe, valued, and seen. Another overlooked detail is the way women process silence in relationships. For some men, silence feels neutral. For many women, prolonged silence in close relationships can be physically stressful. Their bodies may release stress hormones when they sense emotional distance, interpreting the absence of words as a lack of connection. This doesn't mean they need constant chatter. It means their bodies are wired to interpret communication as safety. A lack of it can feel like a signal of danger or abandonment. That's why even small reassurances or simple gestures can mean so much. Her body interprets them as security. Let's also think about how women's bodies respond to learning. Studies show that women often encode memory differently than men, particularly when emotions are attached to the lesson. If an experience carries meaning, positive or negative, her body locks it into memory with greater intensity. This is why she may remember not just facts, but the context, the feelings, even the smell of the room. Men sometimes think she's overattached to details, but in truth, her biology is reinforcing learning by tying it to multiple senses. This creates richer, more durable memories that shape her decisions long after the event has passed. And then there's patience. Men often describe women as more patient, but what's really happening is that their bodies can tolerate waiting differently. Patience doesn't mean they enjoy delay. It means they've adapted to cycles of anticipation. Their biology has trained them to endure periods of waiting, whether it's in fertility, in raising children, or simply in the rhythms of daily life. That patience is not passive. It is active endurance, where the body and mind work together to conserve energy and sustain hope even when results are not immediate. Another fascinating fact involves how women respond to touch in stressful moments. A supportive embrace, a hand held, even a gentle squeeze on the shoulder can significantly lower stress levels in women more than in men. Their bodies release oxytocin in response to nurturing contact, calming the nervous system and restoring balance. This is why comfort through touch is so powerful. Men may think of touch mainly in romantic or physical terms, but for women, it's often about reassurance, safety, and emotional grounding. We should also recognize the way women's bodies handle leadership. While men often lean on authority or decisiveness, women's bodies and psychology integrate empathy into leadership more naturally. They read nonverbal cues from their team, sense morale shifts, and adapt their style in response. This doesn't make them weaker leaders. It makes them more attuned ones. Their biology drives them to connect decisions to human outcomes, which can create loyalty and trust that pure authority never achieves. Men sometimes mistake this for softness, but it's actually a strategic strength rooted in physiology. Another truth men rarely realize is how women's bodies respond to creativity expressed through the hands. Whether it's painting, cooking, crafting, or even writing, the act of using their hands to create something tangible triggers powerful psychological benefits. It lowers stress hormones, enhances focus, and fosters a sense of fulfillment. Men may see it as a hobby, but for many women, it's a biological therapy. Their bodies crave creation as a form of healing and self-expression, and the act itself becomes a conversation between body and mind. And then there's resilience in relationships. Women's bodies often endure emotional strain with a remarkable ability to recover. Even after betrayal, heartbreak, or disappointment, their psychology often guides them toward rebuilding trust, not because they are naive, but because their bodies are wired to seek connection. That doesn't mean they forget or excuse harm. It means their biology pushes them toward growth and healing rather than permanent isolation. Men may view this as weakness, but in truth, it is strength. It takes extraordinary resilience to choose vulnerability again after being hurt. Let's also look at the way women's bodies experience anticipation in conversations. Before difficult discussions, their heart rates may quicken, their palms may sweat, their breathing may change. Men sometimes interpret this as nervousness, but it is preparation. Her body is mobilizing energy for honesty and vulnerability. And when the conversation happens, her physiology is fully engaged, making the experience more intense and more memorable. That's why women often recall word for word how a difficult talk unfolded. Their bodies were encoding every detail under heightened awareness. Another overlooked piece is how women's bodies react to humor. Laughter isn't just fun, it's a biological connector. For women, laughing with someone can reduce stress, increase trust, and create a sense of closeness faster than almost any other experience. A man might see laughter as entertainment, but for a woman's body, it is a bonding mechanism. Shared laughter becomes a physical reminder that someone is safe, relatable, and worth being around. That's why humor is so often linked to attraction and trust. And finally, we should talk about adaptability in identity. Women's bodies go through profound changes over a lifetime: puberty, pregnancy, aging, hormonal shifts. And each stage reshapes not just their physical selves, but their sense of who they are. Unlike men who may feel relatively stable in their identity over time, women often experience transformation after transformation. Their bodies demand that they rewrite their sense of self again and again. And while this can be challenging, it also makes them extraordinarily adaptable. They become experts in renewal, in redefining themselves with each phase of life, carrying resilience that men often can't imagine. One of the most overlooked truths about women's bodies is how they manage transitions between roles. In a single day, a woman might move from being a professional to a caregiver to a friend to a partner, and her body shifts gears with each change. Her voice adjusts, her energy redistributes, her posture shifts. These aren't conscious performances. They are biological responses to the environment and the people around her. Men often underestimate how much effort this takes, but for women, their bodies are in constant motion between identities, adapting to whatever is required. It's like a silent choreography that runs beneath the surface of their lives. Another fascinating reality is how women's bodies process silence at night. For many women, nighttime isn't only about rest. It's when the body finally has space to process unspoken worries. Their heart might race while lying still. Their mind might replay conversations. Their body may even release tension through subtle movements in sleep. Men sometimes drift off quickly, but women's bodies often stay alert longer, listening, scanning, carrying the leftover weight of the day. Sleep, when it comes, is often lighter because their biology is tuned to wake at small disturbances. A leftover survival instinct from protecting children and households across history. We should also think about how women's bodies respond to recognition of effort, not the grand public gestures, but the small acknowledgments of daily labor that often goes unseen. When a man says, "I noticed you did this," or when a friend expresses gratitude, her body can relax in ways she might not have realized it was tense. The weight of invisible work is heavy, and recognition lightens it. Her shoulders loosen, her breath deepens, her energy lifts. Men sometimes think compliments must be extravagant, but for women, being truly seen in their efforts can change their physical state for the better. Another truth is how women's bodies experience longing. Longing isn't always romantic. It might be for a dream deferred, a place far away, or a version of themselves they want to rediscover. Their bodies carry that longing in restless energy, in sighs, in eyes that drift when they should be focused. Longing lives in the body like a quiet ache, a reminder that something is missing. Men may push longing aside, but women often let themselves live with it. And that relationship with longing shapes their creativity, their decisions, and their resilience. There's also the matter of adaptability to change in environment. Women's bodies are often more sensitive to temperature shifts, noise levels, and even air quality. A drafty room, a sudden loud sound, a stale atmosphere. These can affect their comfort, focus, and mood more sharply. Men might dismiss these sensitivities, but they are real and biologically rooted. Women's bodies read the environment carefully, a trait that historically helped with survival, alerting them to dangers or shifts in safety long before they became obvious. Another overlooked layer is how women's bodies experience generosity. Acts of giving, whether of time, love, or care, can trigger warm physical responses, releasing dopamine and oxytocin, making them feel fulfilled even if tired. Their bodies are wired to reward generosity with feelings of meaning. This is why so many women give even when they are exhausted. The act itself replenishes something within them, even if it costs them energy. Men may think giving is purely selfless, but for women, the body makes generosity part of their survival strategy, a way to sustain relationships and ensure collective strength. Let's also consider how women's bodies handle waiting for closure. When a conversation is left unresolved or a relationship ends without answers, their bodies hold onto the tension. Sleep may be restless, appetite may shift, and the mind circles back again and again. The body resists letting go without closure because it wants resolution. Men may brush it off, but women's bodies make unfinished stories linger, pushing them to seek completion not because they're stubborn, but because their biology links closure to safety. Another striking truth is how women's bodies process laughter with other women. Shared laughter in groups creates a physical resonance. Heart rates align, muscles relax, endorphins surge. It becomes more than amusement, it becomes medicine. These moments of laughter carry into their lives, strengthening bonds, buffering against stress, and reminding their bodies that joy is as essential as food. Men may see it as trivial chatter, but for women, laughter together is a form of survival, a collective release that keeps them strong. And then there's how women's bodies experience courage. Courage is often imagined as dramatic acts, but for women, it can be everyday defiance, speaking up in a meeting, setting a boundary, saying no when it's easier to say yes. Their bodies often tremble, voices may shake, hearts may pound, but they step forward anyway. Men may see the shaking as weakness, but in reality, it's biology showing what bravery costs. Courage doesn't erase fear, it moves through it. Women's bodies show the visible toll of courage, which makes their bravery even more profound. Another piece we should explore is how women's bodies interact with touch that is unwelcome. Even subtle boundary violations can cause a sharp physiological reaction. A stomach that knots, skin that feels hot, breath that quickens. It's not overreaction, it's survival instinct. Their biology is tuned to sense and resist danger, and the body records these moments even when the mind tries to dismiss them. Men may not always notice the effect, but women often carry the memory of such experiences physically, sometimes for years. There's also the way women's bodies respond to creativity that connects to others. Writing a letter, cooking a meal, planning a celebration when the act of creation is for someone else. Their body often releases joy and purpose more intensely. This isn't about self-sacrifice, but about biology tying fulfillment to community. Men may create for achievement, but women's bodies often tie creativity to connection, making the act more emotionally and physically rewarding. Another truth is how women's bodies process change in relationships. When closeness fades, even before words are spoken, their bodies often know. The rhythm of interaction feels different, the energy shifts, and their body responds with unease. They may sleep less deeply, feel more anxious, or experience subtle fatigue. This sensitivity doesn't make them paranoid. It's a finely tuned awareness of human connection. Their bodies detect absence before the mind fully names it. We should also reflect on how women's bodies navigate ambition. Ambition isn't simply drive. It's energy the body channels into focus and persistence. Yet women's ambition is often complicated by societal expectations, and their bodies sometimes carry that tension as stress. Still, their biology sustains them in the pursuit of goals, pushing through exhaustion with remarkable stamina. Ambition for them is not just about achievement, it's about carving space for themselves in places that weren't always built to welcome them. Another overlooked truth is how women's bodies register safety in spaces. Walking into a room, they notice exits, the presence of others, the tone of voices. Their bodies scan automatically, heart rate adjusting, muscles tightening or loosening based on what they find. Men may not understand this vigilance, but for women, it is second nature. Their biology primes them to sense risk quickly, because safety has always been a condition they must measure constantly. And finally, there is how women's bodies live with memory of joy. A beautiful moment, a hug from a loved one, a triumph after struggle, a night of laughter doesn't fade quickly. Their bodies hold it, revisiting it through scent, music, or even a sudden quiet moment. This memory of joy becomes a resource, something they can draw on when life is heavy. Men may let joy slip past, but women often carry it, stored in their biology, ready to remind them that light is still possible. When you step back and look at everything we've uncovered, patterns become impossible to ignore. Women's bodies are not just physical forms moving through the world. They are archives, instruments, guardians, and storytellers all at once. They hold memory in the way a song can bring back childhood. They hold longing in the way a quiet sigh escapes during a moment of reflection. They hold resilience in the way a woman stands tall after being told for years that she should sit down. Their biology is not just about function. It is about meaning. It is how life itself insists on continuing, even when the odds are against it. What men often miss is that every detail we've explored, from sensitivity to environment to the way hope shapes their energy, is not random. It is the result of generations of adaptation, survival, and connection. Women's bodies were built to keep not only themselves alive, but to keep whole communities alive. That is why they notice the draft in the room, why they wake up at the sound of the smallest disturbance, why they multitask until exhaustion, why they sense shifts in mood before words confirm them. Their biology is tied to vigilance, to nurturing, to weaving safety into environments that might otherwise be indifferent. And yet, this is not a burden alone. It is also a source of unmatched strength, and in the end, perhaps the greatest shock is not what women's bodies can do. The greatest shock is that they have been doing it all along, right in front of us, and too many have chosen not to see.